Hey everybody, how you doing? I think I've got a good topic for you this week. Something that may get your juices flowing a little bit, make you think a little bit. Sometimes the things that you would disagree with the most help sort of concentrate, help you to concentrate and sort of really go over your own ideas and understand them better. They force you to have to really take a deep dive on your own ideas. Why do you believe what you believe? How did you come to those? Maybe I should be rethinking things. Maybe. So all that, can be healthy. If you're new here, a couple of things you should know is that I like to just burn. These are unscripted, and I like to go in one take. All right, I love improvisation, but that's dovetailing nicely. Um, I like people who can just, there's a few people here that I really like who will sit there and just turn on the camera. They are unrehearsed and they just burn. And what it lacks in preparation, what it lacks in, it's maybe not as clean as it could be, right? But it makes up for it. And I think it comes across more as being more genuine. Leave the mistakes in it. The mistakes are okay. Boy, I'm really dropping a lot of breadcrumbs this time because, that's I like that approach to improvising, and we're going to talk about improvising today. This is really much more for jazz people and musician-y people who are involved in improvisation, and that's a big part of my own background. So I think I'm talking about something that I know, but right, who could say they have necessarily bona fides? No. So yes, I like to burn, and I appreciate other people who can extemporaneously just go off on a topic, and it's not clip, 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 clip. It's not being snipped every 5 seconds while they get their head together. And it reminds me of the old. I guess I appreciate someone who can speak, and it reminds me of the old Steve Martin line where he said, some people have a way with words, and others, not have way, I guess. It's a great line. Anyway, so, and also if you're not new here, if you've seen these, I want some kudos because the lighting is getting better. I am learning how to light. You don't see the big ring in my glasses, right? I got rid of the ring. We're learning how to light ourselves. How about that? Production values. My God. Yeah. So anyway, all of this is to get to, I saw a post on Threads. I used to be on Twitter, X, but when they became X and it started, I'm gone. And so I'm doing Threads. And Threads very much serves the same purpose for me. And I see more musical content. And I saw a musical post about jazz improvisation, basically. And it was about jazz improvisation. No, basically about it. It was about jazz improvisation. And it was the exasperated musician post. Boy, people, man, can't stand when people, don't they just get it? Which is fine. We all have those emotions sometimes. So I'm not knocking that. But he had quoted a post. You could see it was a post that was quoted, and he was responding to this. And the original post was saying something along the lines of, when I'm playing on ballads and things like that, I just don't feel that my improvisations are musical enough. Now, I'm only opening a can of worms, a term like musical, right? Because we can define that any number of ways, and people, okay. But I think we could probably, it is a very open-ended term, but I think we can generally agree most of the time we're talking about musical, we're trying to say not so much technical as if you're playing on a ballad and you're talking about being musical. I'm thinking you're a matter of note choice and things that you're going for that are gonna be emotional or have some that kind of connection and swoon worthy, and that you're playing something that it's not about a technical feat so much as playing something that really gets across some emotion perhaps. And so that was the original post. So this person was responding to it. And this person responded by saying, well, the reason you're not getting musical, it's so obvious. Everyone knows this. I mean, good Lord. What you got to do is work out all of your solos ahead of time so that when you go and you play the solo, then you... It was an argument to be a better jazz improviser, don't improvise. I know I'm paraphrasing here, but that was the argument. Work out your solos ahead of time, which sort of goes against everything, right? So I was I was stunned a little bit, and then I read some of the responses to this guy. Now, keep in mind, this guy is a guitar player, apparently fairly accomplished. He's selling method books and things. Of course, there's a lot of people selling. Everyone seems to be selling a method book. So I guess that doesn't, I'm going to show you the answer. I've got the answer. So first of all, there is an answer, and they're in possession of it. But they'll sell it to you for $20. And it's so easy if you just learn pentatonic patterns. And you just go, oh, okay. Oh, guys, come on. There's not an answer. No. Okay, so maybe that's, I don't know this guy. Maybe that's not where he's coming from. But the idea that, geez, you just work out your solo ahead of time. And I think that's an extreme opinion, all right? But the fact that it's out there and that it's out there is kind of amazing to me. Now, I read what people had to say, and they weren't angry, and it didn't become a big fight, and I'm thankful for that. But what folks responded by saying, well, I think what we want to do ideally is get so much music in our head because we've been taking enough solos, we've learned patterns, and we've put them through the keys, and we've learned patterns that work on every kind of chord and every kind of chord scale. That there are things we know what to play over augmented chords and diminished chords, and we know what to play over all these situations and different ways of approaching harmony, and we've gotten so much of that in our head. And got so much of that under our fingers that ideally when you're improvising, and you are improvising, there will be a flow state, right? Where you're hearing what's going on. It's the old Charlie Parker line, right? Learn the chord changes and forget the chord changes. Get so inside those changes and understand them so well, both from an intellectual point of view, but also just being able to hear them and hear everything that was submitted, you hear it, these ideas will sort of pop out of you like learning a language, right? Although I never liked the language, I never liked that analogy per se. There's a lot of reasons that breaks down, but it's enough so that we do learn language similarly, where eventually it explodes beyond the sum of the parts, and you start to become actually fluently. Well, there's a moment, I think, of that where things start to come out and it's wonderful. And you're like, oh my God, I just heard it and knew it and played it. That's great. And I think most jazz musicians definitely get to that point, right? So there was some pushback to this guy about that. I didn't get involved. But it made me start to think about how much has changed and kind of the arrow of time, if you will. And I'm not fighting against the arrow of time or that things change or that things evolve, because things do evolve. In fact, some of what I think I'm saying is just an observation of the fact that there is change going on and there will be change going on. It's okay. I just had a birthday, and so it's interesting. I'm no regret it, or I don't, oh no, I'm old, I shall wear my trousers rolled. No, I'm not turning into proof rock. No, it's fine. But and I'm enjoying it. One of the things I'm enjoying is that when you're young, time is on your side, and we will run the world, and the old people will go away, and we will do, okay. And then when you get to this point in life, okay, you're not old, you're not in that place, but you're not young either. But your world is going to be phased out because you're going to be heading to that, and they're going to be, and their idea of what the world is what the world's going to be. And if you stick to yours, oh, well, you're going to get left behind. You have to, part of our job as we get older is to transition and continue to understand this world. So I'm not knocking today's jazz musicians, for instance. They learned what they learned in their time. What else could they do? I guess, look, on some levels I will be knocking today's jazz, but I'm not knocking, look, the circumstances are what the circumstances are, right? So they can't be blamed for the where we are in the arrow of time, the distance that we are from where this music was at, all right? And I don't want to make this a generational argument, because I don't think, because honestly, generational arguments in and of themselves are pretty stupid. No particular generation's got it figured out that they know the pure world and everybody. No. But they may be able to access information because they lived through a period of history that other people who didn't live through that history can't know. I knew people of the World War II generation, and they talked about it. In fact, I had a grandfather who was in World War I, because he had my dad very late in life, and my dad had me a little later. So my grandfather was in World War I, and I got to know someone who could speak of a U.S. sailor's experience in World War I. I was able to talk to that guy. All right. And I knew, like I said, I knew a lot of World War II guys, and talking about that experience in the way, that's great. But so I'm one removed, but I'm not the same as those guys who lived it. They knew it in a way that I could never know it, right? And the more time goes by, the further removed you get, it's not the same. You don't have the same level of understanding. I remember I was a Berkeley guy, and that's like 35 years ago, or 84 to 88. You all do the math. So it was a while ago. And one of the things I think, we thought then that we were sort of the last group of people who at least would be able to talk to the guys who actually did it back in the day. All right. So we knew, or we didn't know them, but we got to talk to them. Art Farmer came to Berkeley, and we got to talk to him and get his perspective. Clark Terry was there. Lee Konitz showed up. Who was it? Red Rodney, guy who played with Bird, for crying out loud, right? And you could hear their perspectives on what their intentions were, what they thought the music meant, what they were about, and they had very firm ideas about those things. They had very strong ideas about it, and they had ideas about. They could tell you what the scene was like and what the mood was like and what people were going for. So a lot of really good information could be directly transmitted to you. I thought Konitz was amazing because Konitz was part of Miles Davis's Birth of the Cool sessions. He's a very interesting guy, very bright man, and wonderful thinker. And he influenced, I think, a lot of us. And we're sitting and go, what a brilliant cat who had found his own direction and his own thing. So we got to know them pretty well. We got to bump into a lot of them, enough so that we had a very good idea what it is they thought. And like I say, we were the last group, because we're coming up in the 80s. Jazz was going through a renaissance, mainly because of Wynton's thing. Jazz had kind of been dead already, and then sort of came back to life. So there were a lot of people. It was a thing happening again, and the people trying to bring it back to life wanted to understand from the time they weren't there, because it was before their time. They wanted to get all the knowledge they could from those people to understand it. That was a big thing. And jazz was taught very differently then than now. Now things are very prescriptive. Look, there was more jazz, even in the 80s, as bad as that was, a lot more jazz happening then than is happening now. There were more clubs. There was more of an audience. There was somewhat of an audience. It wasn't great, but there wasn't. But now it's really, really small. And most of jazz happens in academic settings, where the only people doing the teaching didn't live in that time. certainly didn't live in the time when the music was being created. Now they're a generation or more after that. They really don't have that connection to any of that. And it's become a very prescriptive, and the bandwidth seems very, very narrow, and everyone's learning exactly the same way. There's less, it's become prescriptive, and it's become ticking boxes. And I will say that the players today have never played better. They're better on their instruments, and they play through changes and all these sort of things incredibly. And it seems less emotionally effective, and it seems less a personal statement from them. It sounds like people playing etudes perfectly. It's what I said at the beginning of this video, right? I'm burning. I'm unrehearsed. Unrehearsed good. And these guys are so, it's perfectly played, but it's always lacking this element. And it makes me much less interested. And I think all they care about, I think there was a time when people were still trying to play music that would connect to people. And I think now at this point, they're like, no, we've given up on that. We're just playing for each other. It's a contest. And it feels like that. It feels like it's become that. And you go, okay, now your generation, okay. But I knew some of those cats. And I think we were luckier to be closer in the timeline to, we weren't part of the generation that invented this music. You know, we didn't get to see the Armstrong generation, the Ellingtons and the Basies. We might have seen little bits, but we weren't able to connect to them. They were either passed away or soon to be passed away. It was the next group up. We were able at least to be connected to them. That's as close as we got, but that's still a lot better than, right? And we're here now. Young guys don't have any connection really to that. They can't really go and meet them. So that's one element of it. And the idea that if someone had said the thing that I saw in the post, and they, about working out your solos ahead of time, I'm thinking about the guys who are my teachers. They would have stopped you and said, no. And they would have set you right. They would have set you straight, at least in their ideas. I'm thinking in particular, I remember I had some class with the tenor saxophonist Bill Pierce, who's an absolute gentleman. I do not claim to know Mr. Pierce well. I had him for classes, 35 years ago. A couple classes where, a serious thinker, man of tremendous integrity. He had reverence for the music, and didn't like, he was playing with Tony Williams' group at the time, the great group with Wallace Roney on trumpet. Him and Wallace Roney were the front line, my Lord. I think it was Charnock Moffat was probably playing bass with Tony's group, and extraordinary piano player. Mulgrew Miller was on piano. I mean, that was an insane group, and I remember seeing them live. And at the same time as we were seeing him live, Mr. Pierce was one of my teachers. A guy like Bill Pierce would have had very little patience for someone saying, well, you just work out your solos ahead of time. It would have been, it's anathema to what they thought. And although look, I get that there's change, okay? And the change has happened. We're now in this world of this kind of idea of what jazz is. But I could say it's not something I want to be a part of. I think it's really a betrayal. Not an intentional betrayal, but per se. But I think it shows a lack of imagination. This idea that we're gonna play it exactly the way it was played back then, like it's almost an impression. That by itself, is kind of problematic. You could play the old tunes, but the idea is that not to be a museum piece, that eventually we're going to go do something else. I think that was always the idea. And the spirit of playing jazz was of being innovative. There's nothing innovative about playing the Great American Songbook at this point. It's been played over and over and over and over to death, to death, to death. Playing, standards again. I love playing standards. Don't get me wrong; it's a great time. But I wouldn't sit there and say, "Oh, this is somehow the fresh new thing." It's an extra. I mean, it even gets to the point where people wearing trying to, jazz cosplay. They're wearing hats and they're doing stuff and they're trying to look from another time. So there's that. But I think there's another dimension to this, which I don't ever hear discussed. I never hear it come up at all. And that other dimension is, let's think about what the guys in the day were doing, as far as playing jazz is concerned. If you went back, and we have to go back now, like 60 years, but if you go back to, Miles and Monk and Train and Joe Henderson and Wayne Shorter and Herbie albums in the 60s, and if you go back to all of those folks were not playing music that had been prescribed to them. They weren't playing music from 60 years before. They weren't sitting around going, okay, we're going to play jazz. Let's make sure we play Dixieland, which was 40 years before. But they weren't doing that. They were literally inventing a new style and continued to invent new permutations of the style until they basically ran out of room, right? On late 60s, we start getting, finally it starts, it did the same thing that Western compositional music did, right? You went from the age of polyphony to you went to Schoenberg, right? You ran out of notes and everything splattered and splintered, and we did that. Jazz music essentially did that from the 1920s to 1960 or so, and now it goes all over, and then there's trying to rein it back in. And okay, all right, that's okay, but that's essentially was going on. But they were trying to create something new. Creating something new was a big part of defining yourself as a jazz. Is anybody doing that right now? And I don't see it. They're intentionally going to go back and play some style from the past and play it perfectly, but you're still trying to recreate something that was already done and already there. And it goes against aesthetically the whole idea. So, I hear it's all seems to be about this, it's the TikTok, Instagram way of playing jazz, whatever gets us the most attention, whatever is the most perfect and whatever. And it's a mess. So I think it's missing on a couple levels. And I'll speak for myself, who would want to play a style of music at this point where you're chasing some, that it's only about virtuosity? I'll give you another example. And again, I see so many, there are plenty of players playing great. Okay, playing great. And I know there are players and there are people out there doing things that are individual and making individual statements, not generally in jazz, but there's some of that, I think. I'm sure it exists. All right, so I'm not trying to, paint with such a wide brush that I'm just smoking everybody. No. But I have to go to get a personal. I usually have to go outside of jazz, and I saw a thing recently. I saw a Chet Baker clip, okay, of him playing a standard. All right, but again, when he was playing it, it's different era of time, right? Different perspective when he's playing something in like 58 or 64. But he was playing live, and it was some clip of him playing, and so I was listening to where he was going with things, and it was obvious he was thinking it through and coming up with ideas on. These weren't pre-existing things. He was listening to what was going on around him. He's feeling what he felt, and he made that come out of his instrument. And it wasn't perfect, but it was so much better. Even though it was technically not as good, it was so much better than most of the. I never heard this particular clip before. I think it was just some live gig and someone had a clip. And so I was interested because I know a lot of the stuff, right? I know the albums, I know all the stuff. I was like, I don't know this. What's he going to do? Where's he going to go? And he went to some places I wouldn't have guessed. I was like, man. And people put down Chevy. Oh, he's not a great technical trumpet player, blah, 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 blah. All true. I'd rather listen to him. And I don't think that's generational. He was recording this before I was born. I'm not saying, my generation. I'm just saying, when it's good, it's good. And again, plenty of good players today. But I don't and I don't think they're even trying to play for I think there's some responsibility. It's the Steven Spielberg thing. When he made Jaws, everyone gave him a hard time because he made a monster movie. And they thought he was going to be the great auteur. And I think Spielberg was sitting there saying, why can't it be both? Why can't I make a good film that has some popularity as well? So that we have some touch with the culture and we move the culture around. There's not much about that, the old Great American Songbook, that's that relevant to this world at this time. Part of our job is to be making music that sounds like today and is a response to that and is a personal statement. That's art. Art is okay. Now look, nothing is supporting art. There's nothing in the world these days where all that matters is money. We've never been in a scene where all that matters is money quite like this. You can't even get the news because the scales are being tilted upon how much engagement we're going to get. We're going to make this election a horse race, but we're not sure it is, or it's going to be a horse race. Right? Okay, so, right, all that matters is how much bread we're going to make out of this. So, if that's the only way you mentioned you think something is successful, then no wonder it's a terrible time for art. Art doesn't make money. Art never made money. But we've got to, that's why I'm sitting there going, I want to find a way. It's been an extra wake-up call for me to sit there and go, in my own material, I'm looking to find ways to do stuff that's interesting, combine things in a way that maybe haven't been combined quite before. How about some jazz voicings on some different instruments with some different grooves behind it? And maybe we can sneak in some cool, more subtle things into the culture, and maybe it would sound like what the culture is now, and do something that's relevant and good, but also could be listened to, that's too much for people that they couldn't. No, there's a sweet spot there. Is there a sweet spot? Can we find it? Is it something that I'm hearing? Can I find that thing that I'm hearing in my head that I think that's doing some artistic work? I want to do that. I don't want to chase the approval of people. You're never going to get approved by that crap. Oh my God. So that becomes, and why would you chase something like that? It's kind of ridiculous. You don't need that. They can't confer legitimacy. So these thoughts have been on my mind, and it's just one post. That's all it took. And look, I got all revved up here. So listen, let me know what you think. Maybe this sounds very controversial. I don't think this is that controversial. And I think there is lots of room to have a conversation. I don't think for one second that I've got some definition, that my definition is, no. There's lots of room to have a conversation. There are lots of different approaches to doing art and doing art music at this time. Equally legitimate, equally great. Let's do them all. That's all fine. But if you find any of this interesting, give me a like, give me a subscribe. I could use all the help I can get. And I'll be back, I'm sure I'll be back soon with more stuff to chat about. But this was on my mind. This is it definitely piqued my interest and sit there and go, and made me evaluate. Is it me? Am I being generational? And the more I thought about it, I'm like, I don't think so. Every idea that didn't happen last week is a bad idea, and there's a lot of that now. Without being generational, that can't be true either, right? I mean, we've got to be, and I see a lot of anger, especially from younger folks. I see a lot of anger. Anything that didn't come up in the last 6 weeks is the worst idea that ever happened. We got to be, because I've been noticing a lot of that, I've been reading a lot of history. I talked about that in a previous video. Reading a lot of history lately, and it's been very instructive about, human beings don't change much. Human beings most certainly do not change much. The milieu changes and warps and does all sorts of crazy stuff. But human beings are essentially the same. And we've done all of that. Everything we've done before at some point. Now just finding the repeat bit of history to sit there and go, look at that. Then they were doing this. So, okay. So it's not, none of this is impossible. Anyway, I will talk to you guys, I would guess in a week, something like that. In the meantime, but if you have any thoughts, let me know. I'm curious. And I'll chat with you soon.